Hello and welcome back to the College Football Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel. Um, this weekend was a pretty amazing weekend of college football. It was filled with upsets. It was filled with great games that just looked and felt phenomenal, and it was just ultimately filled with um an entire weekend of just the greatest things that you could think of out of um out of a weekend of college football. And so, we didn't talk that much about we talked barely any about any other games except for the Ohio State Michigan game last week. And that's because of my love, and we're going to talk a lot about the Ohio State Michigan game, today, because that's the game with the biggest playoff implications and all of that. But for the most part, it's going to be talking about Michigan, Ohio State. It's going to be talking about Alabama. It's going to be talking about Clemson. It's going to be talking about USC and Notre Dame. Who has a chance to get into the playoffs? Who doesn't? At least in my opinion. It's going to be talking about some hiring decisions that are happening right now. So I'm really excited for this episode because I get to start off talking about my favorite team, the University of Michigan. Now, I want to talk about my experience as a Michigan fan for quite nearly 21 years now. And as a Michigan fan, I've sat in the stadiums and I've watched our team lose. I've sat in the stadiums and I've watched our teams barely squeak by. I've watched us be a mediocre football team at best sometimes, during the Rich Rod era and the Brady Hoke era. Brady Hoke had one good year and then it was all downhill from there. And I don't think Rich Rod really had a good year. I think he was like I think his best wins were close to like a an 8-win season. I think was his best season, if I'm not mistaken. I think Brady Hoke had like a 9 or 10 win season, his first year, and I think that was with Denard Robinson as well. But you know, I have watched for 20 years. I've watched Michigan lose to Ohio State University. Um, I have watched them um, be at home and lose by 20. I've watched them go on the road and lose by 30 or 35. I have watched Ohio State dominate us year in and year out to the point where a lot of Ohio State fans just thought, it was a given, you know, and they got used to beating mediocre um, University of Michigan football teams. And last year was the first year that a good Michigan team went to Ann Arbor or stayed at Ann Arbor and won very convincingly against a very good Ohio State team. Now there were issues with the team. You could say there's weather impacts and there's health impacts. Injuries and things like that. So whatever. Maybe it was a fluke. Well, Saturday just happened. The greatest Saturday of the year. 52 weeks out of the year, and one Saturday is better than all of them. All of the rest combined, there's one Saturday that's better. And that is this Saturday, or this past Saturday, I should say. And Michigan proved that they weren't a fluke, that they are now the leaders of the Big Ten, that as they say, those who stay will be champions. That is their motto. And they proved that this weekend. They proved it beyond any shadow of a doubt. Beyond any shadow of a doubt. They've taken the Big Ten East and are very heavy favorites to now take the Big Ten. This was the most watched college football game in like 15 years. Here, I've got the stat. I've got the stat right here. Let's see. Okay. This was the most watched college football game in 17 years. All right. This was the most watched college football game ever on Fox News. Or not Fox News, on Fox. The most watched football game ever with 17 million views. And I think at one point it was up to nearly 20 million views. It was concurrently viewing. The average was 17. That's the average. That's probably not counting at the end where maybe it was like 12 million viewers, just watching because they knew Michigan was going to win, or at halftime where maybe it was 20 million viewers that was going to try and watch Michigan win. That is the average. 17 million views. So to see Michigan finally crack a 20-game losing streak, a 20-year losing streak in Ohio, in Columbus, I should say, was glorious. It was one of the most glorious moments of my life. And after losing your star players in the in the NFL draft, I should say, after losing your star players, after losing Aiden Hutchinson, after losing David Ojabo, all right? And losing several other key players on defense, you come back with a defense that is arguably better. That is arguably better than what they had last year. It's glorious. It is glorious. There's no other word to put it. There's no other way to put it. Now, I want to get into a little bit of, the game itself. I'm not going to go through the box score because you guys can just just watch, you guys can just you watch the game, you saw, you can look up on ESPN. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I also want to say, I think his name is Cameron Calhoun. I know Calhoun is his last name. I'm pretty sure it's Cameron is his first name. He's a 3-star cornerback that was visiting Ohio State at the Ohio State-Michigan game. He was a visitor for Ohio State. He had already previously visited Michigan, so it's not like, he wasn't even looking at Michigan previously. No. He was trying to decide between, several schools. Michigan, Ohio State were obviously on those lists because he was visiting both of them. But after Michigan's dominating win, he calls Jim Harbaugh and he goes, "I am committing to the University of Michigan." And he breaks the news that night. He took pictures with, I believe, Donovan Edwards, with his Ohio State visitor pass still on his body. Still on his body? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, you can't script this better. So now the number is 4 players that have committed to Michigan after the Ohio State Ohio State win this weekend. 4 players. So you have a very good athlete that just committed. I have to look into him more. I previously wasn't even really looking at him. You have a very good offensive tackle, and I believe his name is Luke Hamilton. I did watch some of his highlight reel. It's a quality, player. Cameron Calhoun, who is, a cornerback. He's currently 3 stars, I believe. So he's got potential and promise. And I, for the life of me, can't remember the 4th, but, it is still 4 players, and it is, this is a win that, when in 20 years, sorry, I just had something go through my headphones. I don't know what it was, but it scared the living daylights out of me and made me lose my train of thought. In 20 years, Actually, I'm going to take these off. I don't need them. But in 20 years, we have seen, God, you know, I was talking about the future. Sorry. This is a game that in the future, people might ask when was it that the tides in the Big Ten shifted, in the 2020s era of college football, and people in the future are going to point to last year's game as the catalyst, as the first, notion that things might change. And then they're going to point to this game as the catalyst, this game as the final deciding game that this was very much a college football change in the Big Ten. So let's look back at what I had said for the keys to winning for Michigan, and I did not imagine this at all. So I did predict the score for Michigan winning, so I did think that they were going to win. I did say uncomfortably though. But my prediction for the score, if you did not watch last week's episode, was 28-24. It was 28-24. I thought it was going to be a very close game. Now, Ohio State scored almost 24 points exactly. They scored 23 points. So I was partially right on Ohio State's score, but I was very wrong on Michigan's, scoring 45 points. It was glorious to watch. So I said that Michigan needed to keep their pressure on CJ Stroud. They needed to pressure him all game, and they did. And they ended up with several bad passes, and it ended up, allowing for Michigan to continue gaining momentum in their pass rush. I said that Michigan had to eliminate OSU's offense from getting momentum. And for the most part, I think that they did a pretty good job of that. I think, they didn't allow, except for maybe the first drive, they did not allow, they really didn't allow Ohio State to really get a lot of momentum. Their first time coming out here, or first time coming out on the field, they got a touchdown, and it was decent. But after that, Michigan did well enough to continuously break Ohio State's momentum. I said we needed to eliminate Marvin Harrison Jr. As a receiving, as a receiver, and I am looking on here, and they didn't really do this. I mean, they kind of did, in the sense that there were a few times where Michigan was able to break up passes to Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. had to drop it, which for him was the first time that they did that. But he still had 7 receptions for 121 yards, 17.1 average, with a long of 42 and 1 touchdown. So it's not like he was eliminated completely, but he was eliminated enough for Michigan to win. Then I said that Michigan had to dominate the line of scrimmage, which they did from like the middle of the second quarter to the end of the game. They pretty much dominated the line of scrimmage. There were times that that at the beginning of the game that they didn't, but at the end they clearly dominated that area, and they played with a ferocity unknown. They played with a energy unknown to mankind, and it was incredible to watch. I said that they had to they had to stop dropping catchable passes. And what do? JJ McCarthy throws for 260 some odd yards, and 3 touchdowns, and runs one hit in himself. And Donovan Edwards runs for 2 touchdowns. I did say that JJ also needed to keep passes accurate. And they had been, we hadn't really seen the pass game at all from Michigan all season. So there were questions about that. But they proved that they could pass. They proved that they were able to. But why pass when you don't have to? When you have a running back like Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, which Blake Corum didn't play in this game almost at all. I think he got like 6 yards for 2 carries or something like that. And then after that, he was completely out of the game. He was pretty much completely out of the game. It was crazy to see. I think his leg wasn't healed. It's something that's going to take more than a week. I hope, that we're able to beat Purdue. I'm almost positive that we are, but you never know. Purdue could come out with with an upset. So I'll be talking about playoff implications of conference championship games later. I think there could be some really interesting scenarios that pop up that start to ask questions about maybe letting one or two lost team, or I shouldn't say one, 2 lost teams in. But I'm going to go through that a little bit later. This is again going to be a longer episode. Another thing, I thought that they were going to keep to their bread and butter, which is their run game, and they pretty much didn't until the very end of the game, where Donovan Edwards had 2 runs for like 75 and like 85 yards apiece. And it is, I hear sometimes where people say, oh my God, those touchdowns are garbage touchdowns because they're too they're too long touchdowns. I'm like, a touchdown, whether it's 85 yards in the fourth quarter or 3 yards in the second quarter, is worth the exact same. It's still worth 6 points, and plus an extra point, it's worth 7. So it doesn't matter when or how long the touchdown run was, or by how many points we're already winning. A touchdown is a touchdown. A touchdown is very, very much a touchdown. Now, for Ohio State's keys of winning, so I was right and I was wrong. I was right that Michigan would win. I was wrong by how much they would win by. I was right in what they needed to do to win, which was to get their passing game going. And I also thought that Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and Luke Schoonmaker, who I'll talk about later, we're all going to be very, very much available in this game. Now, Luke Schoonmaker was, and he looked very good. Donovan Edwards also was very, very, he was available. He wasn't 100%. He basically had a cast on his dominant hand, so he ran the entire day with his left hand, which to do is just somewhat amazing to me. It really is phenomenal. All right. OSU's keys for winning was play physical. They did not. At the end of the third quarter, they'd rolled over. They had rolled over. They had lost the fight that they had lost the fight that was in them in the first half. And part of me actually felt bad for them. But that part was only like 2% of me. And the rest of the 98% was like, sucks to be them, but we're winning, so I'm glad we're winning as a Michigan fan. But they lost composure. This is one of the biggest things, is they committed penalty after penalty so many times. they had several unsportsmanlike conducts in this game. A guy was one of the Ohio State players headbutted a Michigan player, I think on a punt. I think it was on a punt. So it wasn't even like, oh, he had caught a great pass and then ran out of bounds and then he just headbutted him. No. I think it was on a punt. But they also had pass interference calls. And they also let the Michigan wide receivers get behind them. The Cornelius Johnson ran a corner post route, a double move corner post route that ended up going for like 75 yards. So it was great to watch. So that was the first key of victory. The second was to attack Michigan's secondary with CJ Stroud winning, or with CJ Stroud's passing ability, and to a certain extent they did, and they did somewhat well. More so well in the first half than the second, but still somewhat well. I will say though, one of the possibly the best play of the game was not an offensive play for Michigan. It wasn't. It was a defensive play. And this shows the heart of Michigan. Ohio State is in the red zone. I can't remember when it was. I think it was in the fourth quarter, or maybe it might have been late third quarter. But Ohio State had driven down the field. I can't remember, and I apologize. I really should know. Ohio State had driven down the field, and C.J. Stroud was there. He dropped back in the pocket. Stover went on I think he went on a corner route, or it might have been a flag route. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember. He went to the outside. That's what I remember. And CJ Stroud throws the ball to Stover. And Stover at this point is being covered by Mike Sainristil, who last year was a wide receiver. CJ Stroud throws the ball to Stover. Stover catches the ball. And Mike Sainristil jumps and knocks the ball out of Stover's hands. And this is a third down situation where they had to pass, I'm pretty sure. And now it's fourth down, and they have to kick a field goal. And I think this was possibly the only field goal kicked in the second half. I think that this might have been the play that preceded that. But it showed, that one play showed how much heart that Michigan played. Because I think if you stacked up this Michigan team to this Ohio State team, just player to player, the Ohio State team would be winning quite more frequently. But as a unit, Michigan is able to pull off a win of this magnitude. And that shows tremendous heart in my opinion. And that goes into my second point and my third point in attacking the Michigan secondary and get favorable man-to-man matchups. And Michigan actually eliminated, I think, Marvin Harrison Jr. in the second half as a threat, because they kept putting a safety over the top of Marvin Harrison Jr. So there's a point. One of Michigan's only real mistakes of the game was in the beginning of the first half. And at one point in the first half, I think it was in the first quarter, Jesse Minter decides to blitz the strong safety from his point, probably 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage defensively. So he's trying to sprint to get to the quarterback. It's never going to work like that. It just isn't. CJ Stroud is just too good of a quarterback. The offensive line for Ohio State is just quality enough to not let that happen. But he did it anyways, and it was a mistake, and it ended up in, I think, being a touchdown. I could be wrong, but I think it ended up either in being a touchdown or a very, very large gain. And you did not see a play like that again all game, which shows that you can learn. They learned on the field what's going to work and what's not going to work. And they kept his safety over Marvin Harrison Jr. most of the second half, which eliminated him from being an option because CJ Stroud didn't want to pretty much push it into, two players with the possibility of interception, which he already had two interceptions by the end of the game. He had two interceptions late in the fourth quarter. So, and the fourth key that I talked about last week was stop the run game. And in the first quarter, Michigan had 0.3 yards per rush. So they did stop the run game in the beginning. By the end of the game, they had 280 yards or something like that, or 300 yards rushing total. But in the end, it was Michigan's passing game that allowed them to win this game. And I want to talk now about what that addition of the passing game could mean for Michigan's chances in the playoffs and possibly a national championship. I think that this puts Michigan ahead of Georgia. Now, this is by far the most impressive win of the college football season. There is not a win that is more impressive. So, there's no win by Georgia that is more impressive than this Michigan win. And I think that they deserve to be number one after this because Ohio State is still ranked number 5. They didn't, at least in the AP poll, they're still ranked number 5. They didn't drop down to 10. And Michigan also has a top 10 win against Penn State. So it's not like this is a fluke game. This is a game that Michigan truly won. And I think with the addition of this passing game, if JJ can keep this up, it is very possible that Michigan could win a national championship this year. And I think that it is a very distinct possibility that Michigan will be facing Georgia once again in the college football playoff, and not in the semifinal this time, in the national championship game this time. And I think that Michigan has the ability to beat Georgia because I think Georgia lost a lot more on defense than Michigan did. And I think actually Michigan has a better defense this year than they did last year. Their secondary is much improved with the addition of Mike Sainristil and Will Johnson, and the retention of players like Rod Moore, Makari Page, others, Jimon Green. Sorry, I shouldn't say others, but Jimon Green, and the rest of the cornerbacks and safeties. Michigan has a very strong chance of stopping a passing game that Georgia has, at stopping Stetson Bennett, and with Michigan having possibly the best run defense in college football, they have a very, very strong chance of stopping the Georgia run game. So now Michigan is not just a one-trick pony in terms of offense. They have multiple tricks up their sleeves. I do want to also say Michigan showed more play creativity in this game than I have seen from them all season. All season. You could take all of the creative plays that they took all season, and it still wouldn't fill up the game plan for this game. They showed so much creativity, and now I'm questioning myself. I'm like, where is this creativity coming from? Where is it coming from? Where? Like, I have not seen creativity like this all season, and now, once we face Ohio State, I see the play creativity coming out. Now I understand the Ohio State game is the game that you make special packages for. You have very, very special packages in terms of play calling, in terms of formations, things like that. Things that you practice all season just to get for the Michigan-Ohio State game. But I'm saying they've got to expand this. They should win against Purdue. I think there's something like a 26-point favorite at this point. So they should win. And it's very, very, very interesting. So I think the argument for Michigan can be made to be number one now. as I said earlier, and I think Michigan number 1, Georgia number 2, TCU number 3, USC number 4, and Ohio State number 5. Just most of it is in the AP poll is the only thing that switched around is Georgia and Michigan. So as I said, I completely acknowledge I was right and wrong. Michigan won. They won by a lot more than I thought they were going to. Nobody except for the people in that locker room and on that staff of Michigan's side thought that they were going to win by this much. Nobody. I was watching college football game day. Desmond Howard, I believe it was Desmond Howard was the only person to choose Michigan over Ohio State. Everybody else chose Ohio State, and there's pictures going up on Twitter and Instagram and things like that about it. So, all right. Question: should OSU be in the CFP talks? It brings me so much joy to know that Ohio State fans are starting to make the argument that they should be in the CFP talks because Michigan is so good that they outclass everybody else, and that is the reason that Michigan beat Ohio State at Ohio State, and that they should be in the CFP talks. And I agree with them. Ohio State should be in the CFP talks. They still have a top 10 win. Alabama looked awful. Alabama, while they won, still does not look good. Oregon lost to Oregon State. That takes them out of it entirely. LSU lost to Texas A&M. Takes them out of it entirely. The only question now is USC, Ohio State, TCU. Who gets in, who doesn't? Now, if TCU remains undefeated in their college football, in their championship game on the weekend against number 12 ranked Kansas State in their Big 12 championship game, and in Arlington, Texas, they make it in. They definitely make it in. Georgia, pretty much, even if they lose to LSU, I'm like, you make it anyways because it's Georgia. They've pretty much dominated all season. They're pretty much an automatic get in, and I don't think they're gonna lose to LSU. I think they're gonna beat LSU by probably 2 touchdowns, but it'll be a good game. USC and Utah. This is a game that I think could end up in an upset where Utah wins against USC, and now USC is a 11-2 team. And do you take a USC that is 11-2 who has lost their championship game over an Ohio State that is 11-1 but didn't play in their championship game, in their conference championship game? Who do you take? I would take Ohio State. There are very few teams in the Pac-12 and very few teams that USC has played that has a defense with a pulse. Very few. And I don't think USC has really played a team that has a defense with a pulse. The Pac-12 is all about outscoring your opponent. You're going to have defenses in the Big Ten and in the SEC. That's where you're going to have your best defenses. And I don't think that USC will be able to keep up with them when they play. So this is all dependent on whether or not USC even loses, which is it's a possibility. I think it'll be a close game and it'll be a very fun game to watch. This will probably be one of the most fun games to watch this weekend. This and Kansas State and TCU will probably be the two most fun games to watch. They'll be very amusing. UCF and Tulane play for the American Athletic Conference. That game, it matters to that conference. Doesn't matter in any sort of way to the CFP championship games. And Clemson lost to South Carolina. They're out of the playoff. Now they go and play North Carolina for the ACC championship. I believe North Carolina also lost to somebody. They might not have lost this past weekend. I can't remember, but it'll be, Oregon's loss forced them out of their conference championship game. So their loss not only forced them out of their college football playoff spot, possibly, but also out of a potential college football playoff spot, but also out of their conference championship game. So those two things, it sucks for Oregon, but, what can you do, But I talked about, I think on Monday last week, how impressive USC has become in 1 year. And now, yes, they all they do is pretty much outscore their opponents. Yes, they haven't really played a great defense like a Michigan, like even an Ohio State. I don't think they've played a top 10 defense. But they do have their Heisman, probably the Heisman winner in Caleb Williams, who went 18 for 22, 232 yards, 10.5 yard average, and 1 touchdown. And then, sorry, I think I mentioned this earlier. I don't think I mentioned it just now. Michigan and Purdue will play. Michigan should win this game fairly easily, even without Blake Corum. If he's not able to play in Indianapolis this weekend, they should still very clearly win. It's going to be hard to say that they shouldn't win, but they very, very clearly should. So TCU just dominated. I mean, the one of the reasons that I'm saying TCU should get in, even if they lose to Kansas State, is they absolutely dominated Iowa State. I mean, the score was some 63 to 30 or something like that. Here, let me check. I can't remember what it was exactly. I didn't actually write it down. So 62 to 14. 62 to 14. So I gave Iowa State way too much credit. Now, Iowa State is a 4-8 team, so it's not surprising that TCU dominated them. They did exactly as they should, but it was very clear that TCU, from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, was the better team, just in every single sense of the word. So, TCU will likely make this game. I do want to talk about something. Cincinnati's Luke Fickell, the same guy who brought Cincinnati to the college football playoffs last year, is going to Wisconsin. And this is a power move by Wisconsin. I think this is going to end up being a match made in heaven for Wisconsin and for Luke Fickell. Because I truly think, I think Luke Fickell is a very, very good recruiter. I think he's also a very good coach. I think that he can manage a game very well. He's able to develop players, or at least he knows coaches that can develop players, and he'll bring them with him. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Luke Fickell does at Wisconsin. And when they fired Paul Chryst earlier, I was like, what is going on? What's going on? I questioned the sanity of the Wisconsin administration, because I was like, this is a man who has, I think it was something like a 71% win ratio or win percentage. Like, how do you fire somebody with a 71% win ratio? You just don't do it. That's like saying, all right, Nick Saban, you have 2 or 3 losses this season. You're fired essentially. Like it's the same reasoning. It is you have it's like saying Nick Saban, you have 2 losses this season. You're done. You're done. You're absolutely gone. Get out of here. We don't want you anymore. I'm like, that is an insane thing to think about. Sorry, I'm talking so much and talking animated enough that my throat is getting very dry. So and then but I think that this is a great move by the University of Wisconsin. I think that Luke Fickell is going to do very, very well. From everything that I've heard, he's already accepted, and I do believe it. It's a done deal. So I also believe that Hugh Freeze, the former coach at Ole Miss and a former Liberty coach, is now the coach at Auburn. So it should be. That I don't know much about Hugh Freeze. I know Liberty did fairly well this season. I think they got away with like 7 or 8 wins, so it's an okay season. It's nothing earth shattering. So we'll have to. I'll we're gonna play this by ear. I might look more into Hugh Freeze's career. See where else he's coached and things like that, and talk about it more later on. But for right now, that's all that I know about that. So. One of the other correct questions, this talking about head coaches, is due to the 2 Michigan losses against or two Michigan losses. Should Ryan Day be replaced as head coach? Now, fans were calling for Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's never going to return to football, in my opinion. I don't think he's going to. I think he very much enjoys his cushy job as, I believe, a Fox sports analyst, or at least Fox Sports contributor, and he's I think he's going to enjoy that much more than if he'd go back to coaching. If you asked me right after he got fired from Jacksonville, did I think that he would go back to coaching? I would have said absolutely. But I think that if he was going to go back to coaching, he would have done it by now. He would have found interest in some of the bigger jobs that were available. The job at Auburn, for example, or he might have, shown interest in the job at USC, or he might have shown interest at the job in Wisconsin, because I think he likes building programs up and winning with building that program up. And Ohio State had already had their coach, so I don't think that they were ever going to go backwards to Urban Meyer, and I don't think he's ever going to go back to coaching, in my opinion. I will be surprised if he does, but with at least I will be surprised if he does within the next 4 or 5 years. Because he has a lot to live down from his time at Jacksonville. He was awful at Jacksonville, just horrible. So this is an NFL podcast, so we're gonna, stay away from the NFL talks. But back to Ryan Day, should he be fired? My answer, no. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Michigan fan and I want to keep winning against Ohio State. I'm saying it because the man is a good coach. And as much as it pains me to say it, he is a good coach. He is a quality coach. And in the end, he has a 45-5 record as a head coach. A 45-5 record. How many coaches in college football have ever had that much success in the first 50 games of their career? I'm waiting for an answer. If you guessed no, or if you guessed none, you'd be correct. You just won some random prize that doesn't mean anything. You got a point. Congratulations, you have a point. They have, a meaningless point. There is no coach that has enjoyed that much success in their time in the first 50 games as being a head coach. no coach. So that is my thinking on why Ryan Day shouldn't be fired. I think Ryan Day, I watched Ryan Day's press conference after the win, and there was a moment where a a reporter asked, um, you hired Jim Knowles because last year um, you got burned on big plays, and this year you got burned on even more big plays. And they asked, and by the middle of the question, and I'm paraphrasing this question, but I'm just saying, what question, it's not that exact wording, but and I think their question was, what changes are you guys going to make? And he gave a very, halfway through the question, he kind of put his head down because he felt the question and he knew immediately what it was about. And I think he was partially, ashamed of their performance. And he, he really went in there and he took it on the chin, which, that's brave of him to do. He took everything on the chin, it might have been a punch to the gut, but he stood there and took it anyways. He was like Rocky. Rocky takes all the punishment in the world, but still keeps standing. And, all the credit to Ryan Day. He still kept standing, and he gave a very generic answer to that question. It was like something like, he said something like, we'll have to look at the film and, decide what to do next. And, I think that there's going to be changes. I don't think that there's going to be a new defensive coordinator or a new offensive coordinator or even a new head coach. I think they might have schematic changes or, recruiting changes, things like that. But other than that, I don't think that they're going to, um, they're gonna make changes, just not gonna be ones that you are going to see in the immediate. They're gonna be changes that you see more in the long term. So that is, I think, all that I'm gonna be talking about for today. This is the Monday breakdown. So, um, Kansas State, put the beat down on Kansas, won by 20 points. Washington, same thing, won by almost 20 points. It was 18 points, but very nearly 20 points. Put 51 points on them on Washington State. The USC Notre Dame game was awesome to watch. Even though USC won by 11 points, 38-27, it was really fun. Watching Pine find his tight end over and over and over and over again was really funny and really, really, really fun to watch. But that LSU Texas A&M upset was amazing. I mean, you watched Moose Muhammad make a phenomenal one-armed catch in that game. So, I think that's going to be it. I will see you guys all on Wednesday when we talk about the college football playoff released, rankings when they're released tomorrow evening. So it'll be a lot. It'll be there'll be a lot to talk about. I'm sure we'll get more, news about about coaching and stuff like that. I know actually before we go, I actually want to say I saw rumors of Deion Sanders being offered different coaching jobs. Definitely one from Colorado, and several others. So I wanted to put that out there. But we'll be back on Wednesday. I hope you guys all really enjoyed this episode. I had a great time this weekend. I can't wait. We'll be talking about all of the conference championship games on Friday. We'll be highlighting a couple, but we're going to talk about all of them. We're going to get a rapid punch through type episode there. So it was great to see you guys all. Please leave a like and a comment on this video if you can. A like just takes 2 seconds. Do it. It helps the channel a lot, and it eventually it'll help me get further reach and things like that. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys enjoyed this past weekend of college football. It was nuts. So I really hope you guys continue to enjoy college football. We'll be talking about the playoffs more. So, I hope you guys all have fun and have a great night. See ya.